This is my ranking of RTS games like Warcraft III, Reign of Chaos, based on my personal experience. I placed each one from masterpiece to trash, depending on how well they handle hero-focused strategy, base building, army control, and tactical battles. Let's get into the list. Majesty 2 took a very unusual approach to the RTS genre by removing direct control over units and turning me into more of a ruler, giving rewards and commands from a distance. Instead of manually controlling armies, I had to place bounties, manage heroes, and hope they responded correctly to dangerous situations. That idea actually made the early missions pretty fun, because building a kingdom while watching heroes level up created a different type of strategy experience. I also liked the fantasy atmosphere, detailed buildings, and the way heroes carried across missions. The problem was that the difficulty suddenly became overwhelming halfway through the campaign, with non-stop enemy attacks and chaotic situations that were difficult to manage using indirect control. Some systems also became frustrating during longer missions. This ultimately lands in my good tier. Tempest Rising brought back the feeling of classic Command and Conquer style RTS games while still looking modern and polished. I really liked how fast and combat-focused the gameplay felt because matches rarely slowed down with complicated economy management or excessive base building. The two main factions also had enough differences to keep the campaigns fresh, especially once unit abilities and micromanagement became more important during larger battles. Visually, the game looked excellent as well, with detailed environments, strong cinematics, and smooth performance that made every mission feel polished from beginning to end. The soundtrack was another highlight since the energetic music matched the pacing of the battles perfectly. I just wish the third faction became fully playable because it felt like a missed opportunity. This easily secures a place in my great tier. StarCraft II felt like the perfect evolution of classic RTS design because everything from the controls to the pacing was polished to an incredible level. I loved how each faction had completely different strengths and strategies, yet the game still remained balanced enough to make every match feel competitive and rewarding. The campaign was another huge highlight since the mission variety constantly changed things up with defense missions, hero-focused objectives, and large-scale battles that never became repetitive. Blizzard also did an amazing job with the presentation because the cinematics, soundtrack, and voice acting gave the story much more weight than most RTS games usually manage. Multiplayer was intense as well, especially once matches became faster and more demanding at higher skill levels. After countless skirmishes and campaign runs, this absolutely belongs in my masterpiece tier. Iron Harvest combined dieselpunk visuals, giant mechs, and cinematic storytelling in a way that made its campaign surprisingly memorable. I really liked how the game focused more on tactical battles and map control instead of huge economies, which kept missions active and intense most of the time. The different factions also had their own identity, especially once larger mechs entered the battlefield and battles became much more destructive. One of my favorite parts was the environmental destruction because watching massive machines crash through buildings never got old. The campaign missions also stayed interesting thanks to strong characters, varied objectives, and some genuinely great level design. Combat balancing could sometimes feel too dependent on hard counters, but the presentation and atmosphere carried the experience extremely well. This deserves a strong place in my great tier. Dragonshard tried something very different by combining traditional RTS gameplay with RPG-style dungeon exploration, and surprisingly, the idea worked really well. I liked how battles on the surface connected directly with the underground sections, because leveling heroes, collecting loot, and completing quests actually affected the larger strategy gameplay. The limited base building system also forced me to think more carefully about army composition instead of simply building everything available. Another thing I enjoyed was how captains and units gained experience over time, which made keeping armies alive feel much more important during difficult fights. The campaign could have been longer, and the AI sometimes felt too passive during certain missions, but the unique structure kept the game interesting all the way through. This game earns its spot in my good tier without much difficulty. SpellForce III, Reforced combined RTS gameplay with deep RPG systems in a way that felt much larger and more ambitious than most strategy games I have played. I really liked building my character, choosing skill trees, and managing a full party, while still handling armies and base building during major battles. The world itself also felt alive because there were so many cities, side activities, companions, and long story sequences that made the campaign feel closer to a full RPG adventure. Combat became much more interesting once hero abilities, army positioning, and economy management started working together during larger missions. The learning curve could definitely feel rough early on, especially while learning different factions and resource systems, but the depth kept rewarding me the longer I played. This easily claims a strong position in my excellent tier. Age of Mythology Retold brought classic RTS gameplay back with a modern presentation while still keeping the identity that made the original memorable years ago. I loved switching between different pantheons because the Greeks, Norse, Egyptians, and Atlanteans all had their own myth units, powers, and strategies that kept battles varied throughout the campaign. The large mission count also helped a lot since the campaign constantly introduced new objectives, locations, and mechanics that stopped things from becoming repetitive. Visually, the remastered version looked much cleaner, and the updated effects made mythological powers feel far more impactful during large battles. The voice acting could sound awkward at times, and some mechanics still showed their age, but the core gameplay remained extremely fun and addictive. This easily earns a place in my excellent tier. Age of Darkness, Final Stand, gave me strong They Are Billions vibes with its focus on building defenses, surviving massive enemy hordes, and slowly expanding across dangerous maps. I really liked setting up layered walls, choke points, and siege weapons while preparing for huge attacks that could wipe out everything in seconds if I made mistakes. The different factions and hero units also helped the gameplay stay fresh, because each one had unique abilities and different ways to approach battles. Surprisingly, the campaign ended up being one of my favorite parts since the mission variety constantly changed things up with escapes, large battles, and survival-focused objectives. I just wish the enemy variety was better, because many hordes started feeling too similar after long sessions. The atmosphere, scale, and defensive gameplay easily place this in my great tier. Northgard slowed the RTS formula down in a way that made every decision feel important, especially when trying to survive harsh winters, food shortages, and constant pressure from the environment. I liked how the game focused heavily on resource management, because balancing food, wood, population, and expansion always kept me thinking several steps ahead. The different Viking clans also helped matches feel fresh since each one encouraged completely different strategies and victory conditions. Multiplayer became especially fun once long-term planning, diplomacy, and map control started shaping entire matches. I also enjoyed how the limited building slots forced me to plan settlements carefully instead of simply expanding everywhere without consequences. The campaign was weaker than the rest of the game, but the survival mechanics and strategic depth easily place this in my great tier. That's my RTS ranking based on faction design, strategy depth, and how well each game holds up during long matches. Thanks for watching.